I am Frank Wells. I am 45 years old, chairman and COO of Wells & Co. Incorporations, and divorced. I was married to Betty Caraway for 13 years. She changed, and I had to act. We met after I graduated from college. I was 26, 4 years after finishing my college degree in 3 years instead of 4. My degree is in computer science and electrical engineering, with an emphasis on manufacturing robotics. I was living off income from some small patents I had been successful with. It allowed me to keep trying to come up with new devices. Betty was working in a lawyer's office. She was a receptionist or personal assistant. I had made an appointment to start a new patent filing. She showed me to the office of Gary Wilson, a big-time patent attorney. My idea and design this time was for several tools to use on a robotic arm assembly robot. One of them allowed the programmer to set the machine to tighten bolts to a specific torque setting, and the setting was programmable through my software. I wanted patents on the tools, all of the processes, and the software. I had other successful patents, and so the process was familiar territory for me. I was prepared. I had never worked with Gary, but my former attorney retired, and he recommended Gary. When Gary shook my hand, it was a confident, firm handshake without the dominant games. He had done his homework and was asking great questions and showing an insight that gave me a lot of confidence. I showed him my dated written descriptions and my dated technical drawings. Then I explained that I wanted to blanket patent these devices. When I explained the multiple patent filings as a process to protect everything about the tool, he actually smiled. The young lady came in and offered me a coffee, tea, or water. I declined, but thanked her for the offer. I watched her as she left. Behind me, I heard a soft chuckle. Betty is my sister's daughter, and I would be lost without her around here. I couldn't find the floor without her telling me where it was. Then he got back to my requests. I will put some of my staff on the patent search. That normally will take 6 to 8 weeks. Then if it comes back clear, we will file. Once filed, you will be able to shop your tool to the industry. Do you have any specific type of finished product this will be used for? I really have several industries that could use this tool on their robotic assembly lines. It should be useful for the auto, tractor, and farm implements, small engine equipment, and heavy equipment manufacturing industries. It is designed with 3 different connecting arms to work with all of the major robotic arms used in most plants, I said. We concluded our business, and 6 weeks later I got a phone call. A sweet, soft voice said, "This is the office of Gary Wilson. Would you be available to see him today?" "Sure does 4 p.m. work?" I replied. "That's fine, Mr. Wells. We will expect you then. Please bring your notes on the devices we are working on." Then she disconnected. The patent search turned up clean, and the patents were filed. Gary told me to be patient for another couple of months and to expect calls from several companies in various industries. He explained that most of the major companies have people whose only job was to find new patents they might be interested in. A few weeks later, I now had 12 more patents. Gary wanted to have a celebratory dinner. I thought it was a great idea. He asked if Betty could join us. I agreed. Then the sneaky son of a bitch pulled a fast one. As I arrived at the restaurant, he called and begged off, but he said Betty was already waiting for me inside. I laughed and told him I would find some nasty way to pay him back. Betty was waiting and was very surprised when I told her what her uncle had done. I said, "Let's pay the sneaky bastard back by having a good time." We had a great evening. I did not want it to end, but Betty had to work the next day. I got a nice kiss and her phone number. Then we started dating. I heard from a couple of major manufacturers about buying or licensing my patents. Because of my ongoing relationship with Betty, I told Gary he was my patent attorney, but I would be using another firm for contracts. He understood and agreed. I called my old attorney and he recommended Sarah Calhoun. I talked to Gary and he approved and said he would give her a professional heads up. I called her office and set up an appointment. When I arrived, I was shown directly in. Sarah was a very warm, attractive lady, who when I first met her appeared to be in her mid to late 30s. She offered a seat and we got right down to business. I asked if she had a suggestion as to how to handle the inquiries and licensing requests. We make them come to us. But first, we need to get you set up as a corporation. That way, you are protected, and the corporation pays the taxes on the entire revenue stream, and you only pay taxes on what you draw out. Corporate tax rates are much lower than individual rates. I have a couple of shelves in corporations. We could use one from a state without corporate taxes and reduce the tax burden even further. You do need to find 3 people to be shareholders and board members, but they only need to hold 1 share. Any questions? Yes, I have a couple. One is, can I license my existing patents to the LLC? I asked. I will look into it, but I am positive that you as an individual can sell or license your patents to you as a corporation. Anything else? Can I use family members as board members? I asked. Of course. Can you create a trust for me and have the trust control most, 75% or more, of the shares, with me having the proxies? That's smart, and yes, I can. Last one. Would you be the corporate counsel as well as my business attorney? The way I envision the corporation, I would be both if you wanted me. After that, we discussed license versus outright selling and share distribution. Then I left her a retainer and the inquiry information and left for the day. We set up the corporation as a private concern with 100 shares. I had 12 shares, my mother had 2 shares, my sister had 2, and Sarah had 2. The trust had 82 shares, and I held those proxies. We also set it up so that the shares could not be sold except to a current shareholder or the trust, and that it would need a 90% vote to issue more shares or to sell, assign, or remove shares from the trust. Wilson & Co. Incorporation was in business. We licensed the patents to several companies in the U.S. and overseas. Our revenues were in the high 7 figures just from the robotic wrenches, as we called them. I now had time to completely devote to some other ideas. Betty and I dated for several months, and at Christmas time I asked her to marry me. She agreed. I was advised by Sarah to have a prenuptial agreement in place. She drew one up that protected the corporation, the trust, and my personal assets. It also protected Betty. I asked Gary to look it over to see if I was being fair to Betty. He read it and approved of it. He never asked how well off I was, neither did Betty. I never flaunted it, and she never asked. She signed, and we had an early fall wedding. As a wedding present, I gave Betty 2 of my shares of the company. We honeymooned in Bermuda for 2 wonderful weeks. Betty continued to work for her uncle. She took 2 12-month leave of absence for the birth of Gary and Betty, our 2 children. We did the family things, vacations, houses, school functions, and the like. Gary was an athlete in t-ball and soccer. Betty was all girl, except for being Gary's shadow. When Gary turned 8, he decided that girls had cooties and pushed all of the girls except Betty away. I heard him tell one of his friends, "Betty isn't a girl, she is my sister." About 12 years after we were married, Gary, the uncle, decided to slow down. He took on a partner, a man by the name of Randolph Simmons. I took an immediate dislike to him and told Gary that he was not to have any access to my business or patent information. That caused a major row and forced me to move my patent business to another firm. By that time, I had enough patents to interest several firms. I went with one that Sarah recommended. They only did my patent filings and research. The need to move my business from her uncle's firm caused a serious argument with Betty. I moved out for a couple of weeks. The argument stopped. I did concede that I would not require Betty to quit that firm, but I would not do business with her nor the new partner. After Betty apologized, I moved back. Betty became cold toward me and started to snipe at everything. She was careful to not mention the company business or my leaving the law firm for another. I put up with the bitching until I found out that Randy, as Betty called him, tried to buy her shares in my company. Betty asked me if she could sell them, and I said sure, but only to the corporation. When I asked where the idea to sell came from, she said Randy offered her a lot of money for them. I blew up. I told Betty that as an officer of the company, she had no right to let out any information on the company. I went out and called all of the board members and called a board meeting. We met and voted to purchase the 2 shares that Betty owned and put them in the trust. She was paid the $10,000 a share that Randolph offered her. Then she was voted off the board. I never discussed business in her presence again. The tension didn't ease, and if I thought things were cold before, it became icy. It got so bad that I removed the king-sized bed from our bedroom and put 2 singles in. Betty didn't even protest, but she knew I was royally pissed. After about 6 months of this, and Betty said that she wanted to go out with the girls from the building for a girls' night out. I really didn't see anything wrong with the idea, but she had refused many requests from me for us to go to dinner or to a play or concert. I sarcastically said, "Sure you can go, but all of the girls will come here and pick you up. You refuse to go on a date with your husband, and yet you want to go out with a bunch of single and divorced women. I don't think so. I won't stop you, but I won't be here when you get back, and I will file for a legal separation. You have been a miserable bitch ever since your uncle brought Randolph into his firm. I won't stand for it anymore. I am giving you a choice. Become a wife and mother again or go to hell." She looked at me and I could see the steam rising from her head. She was ready to say something when she must have thought better of it. She spun and ran out of the room. About 20 minutes later, she came out of the bedroom dressed like a low-class streetwalker or a crack whore. "If you go out that door tonight, don't come back. You look like a whore, and you are acting like one too," I added. "I am as serious as a sledgehammer if you leave, and I will have divorce papers on your desk at work before the weekend, and I have more than enough resources to take the kids too. They are already saying you are being mean to them and yelling at them over every little perceived problem. There is the door. Make your choice." She headed for the door, and just before she got there, she turned around and said, "I don't care. Randy will be glad to see me. He will treat me like I deserve." Then she turned and walked out. First thing the next morning, I called Sarah and asked for her to recommend a divorce lawyer who took no prisoners. Then I told her about the fight and Betty's response. She gave me the name of a lawyer, and when I called, I told him I wanted her served at her offices. I gave him all of the information he requested, and I told him to file under mental cruelty. I also told him to hire a private investigator to check on one Randolph Simmons attorney at law. The filing didn't make the weekend, but the first thing Monday morning, the process server served the papers, and Betty collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. It came to light that Randy told her I would never do it, and she believed him. She was also mad that I shut her out of the company. She had a major breakdown. She was placed under suicide watch and transferred to the psych ward for a mandatory 14-day evaluation. The private investigator report on Randy Boy was enlightening. It showed that he was not a lawyer and had never attended law school. He was also wanted in 2 other states for impersonating a lawyer. I gave the report to Gary, and before he could leave the office that day, Randy was arrested and thrown in jail. The 14 days were over, and Betty called and asked to come back to the house. I said, "Remember what I told you the night you insisted on a girl's night out? You left and threw that fake attorney's name in my face. This is no longer your home. If you win it in our divorce, I will burn it to the ground and take my chances in jail." Almost as soon as that smooth-talking bastard walked into your life, you stopped being a loving wife and became a selfish shrew. I've had enough, and I warned you before you can't come back. I heard sobbing on the other end of the call, and then silence. She didn't fight the divorce, the enforcement of the prenup, or the custody, but wanted unlimited visitation. I didn't fight with her on that. She came and got the kids on a regular basis for about 6 months, and then she started to miss a few scheduled times. Then it was a few more times, and after a year, she would send birthday and Christmas cards and never came. Gary's office closed because the publicity over Randolph's arrest lost him too many clients. I offered him a consulting position with the corporation, but he refused. Without any rancor, He said it just wouldn't feel right. Gary died a couple of months after he turned down the offer I made. It was ruled by natural causes, but I think he just lost the will to live. I saw Betty a few times for a couple of years after the divorce, but I lost track after the 3rd year. I haven't seen her since. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.